Hello and welcome to another Agoners Battle Report. This one is another Essence of War Ninth Age Battle Report. As you all know from the title, it's a bit of a special one. I'll explain a little bit more as we go along. Yeah, right. So we're back to tabletop simulator gaming this time. And my last few battle reports have been with real models, but I did mention on a podcast I was on actually very recently. I'll try and drop you a link to that in case you haven't heard it. Yeah, about there's also talking about the Ninth Age, surprisingly enough, so it's all on topic. I did mention I was playing in a little bit of a tournament recently. This has been an online tabletop simulator tournament. It was all streamed live by Veil of the Ages on his fantastic Twitch channel. You can still watch quite a few of the games on there if you've missed any of them live. Some of the games have also been broadcast on the Proxy Table Gaming YouTube channels. So if you don't subscribe to them, watch them, you should do that and go and watch them on there as well. You can drop comments on there. I think one of my games is up on there actually that I played in. And also Veil of the Ages has also got a YouTube channel. He's been explaining the whole process of how he's organised the tournament and things there. It's quite an interesting one. So well worth a watch actually. Very cool if you're into tournament organising. So what we started out with 9 players, 3 groups of 3, and it's this meta triangular concept, which I won't go into all the details of, but essentially it means there's 3 groups of 3, and then the winner of each group goes through to the finals, and they play a last group of 3. Um, Cat has decided to join me to distract me while I'm trying to do this. That's thank you very much for that, Misty. The foster cat as well. But anyway, 2 of the players that did make it through to the finals, unlike me, were RH World Building Rob and Lich King. And as you can see from this screenshot here, they are playing the Saurian Ancients Patrol and the zombies. Well, in this case, the Vampire Covenant Patrol. So I'll go through this a little bit now. I did talk about. I wanted to make this a bit of an analysis video rather than a pure back rep because you can go and watch the things anyway. But I will go through it turn by turn, so you will get to see sort of everything that happens and things like that. But yes, I just wanted to talk. So a lot of this is going to be like before the game even starts because I thought, well, what I'll do, I'll have a good look at these patrols. I have played both these patrols myself in the past, but I haven't looked at them recently. And obviously, some of the magic and things might have changed a little bit as we've developed Essence of War. Um, and one of the things we have been quite interested about in running this tournament was looking at the balance of the different patrols as well. So this has been really useful for the team as well as it's been fun for the players. But some of the players obviously are on the Essence of War World team as well, like Rob is here, and Lich King actually does help out as well. So these two are both very involved in the Ninth Age, two great guys. Um, Worked with them both a little bit in the past. But yeah, one of the things we're looking at the balance of the different patrols, and it was interesting to see which patrols people picked to take. Some people just took the ones that the factions they're most familiar with from fantasy battles, perhaps. Whereas like some people like me picked like ones they thought might be strong. Um, so this is out of what was left because obviously we didn't allow duplicate picks, so it was very much like who got in first got the first dibs on certain patrols and things like that. So Rob's decided to take the Saurians, and he's also done well with them because he's got through to the finals here. And yeah, this is a patrol that some people say is pretty strong. I've kind of looked at this, analysed it a little bit. I think they are good in certain matchups, but they're not good in others. So I think they're a classic kind of a bit rock paper scissorsy, and we're okay with that from an overall balance perspective. What we don't want is sort of one patrol that's like clearly like too strong. But if there's some good matchups, some bad matchups, like that's kind of expected with a game like Ninth Age, and even at the patrol level, we try to minimise that, but it's going to happen a little bit. And the thing with the Saurians is they've got very good magic again. So they've got 3 spells on this Quattle, who's not bad either. He's quite hard to kill because he's got 4 hit points. Age is 4+. They're the big parts of it. He's got good magic. He's got 3 spells, and again, it's those 3 really good spells that the Highborn Elves have as well. Uh, Apologies. Yeah, no, I think I might be wrong with that one. I can't remember exactly what the Highborn Elves have. No, they have cosmology. Apologies. Similar spell setup though, in that they've got two nice range spells and a nice flaming swords, which can be used to buff a unit in melee, of course, and it can even buff the shooting on a unit, which is quite interesting because they do have these skink braves with their poison blowpipe thing. So I think it will affect them, unless I'm very much mistaken. Yeah, +1 to wound modifier to melee and shooting attacks. They get flaming darts, I guess, if you use that. Um, but the patrol and the Saurian warriors are a really strong unit. 2 attacks each, strength 4, AP 2, very decent. But they're only offensive skill 3, defense skill 3, res 4, armor 4, again 3. They're fairly tough. They're fairly good all round, but they only have 1 hit point each, and they're not there's certainly a bunch of better units than them in terms of melee combat. They're not sort of the strongest unit around, but they're not bad. Okay, um, the hidden sort of well, not very hidden, but all they do have is cold-blooded, and that means you roll 3 dice for every discipline check, and you discard the highest, and that makes all their discipline really rather good. So as long as you've got the discipline 8 on the Quattle nearby your Skinks or your Caimans, and the Sorin don't even care because they've got discipline 8 to start with, um, you're pretty sorted. Like your odds of failing one as long as you're steadfast and things like that, is actually very good. And the game I've managed to play with them, I kind of use this steadfast. I kind of use that idea as a kind of creating a steadfast block that wasn't going to run, and then getting encounter charges, things like that. But the skink braves are pretty weedy. This patrol has weaknesses, right? So the skink braves, the fast. The discipline 5 is not, as I say, not as bad as it looks because they're cold-blooded and the chance of getting a discipline from the Quattle as well. He's pretty mobile. The Quattle can't join a unit, interestingly, because of his base size in Essence of War. There's no way he can join any unit, so he's always have to be solo. But I think you probably run him. He's probably a good way to do it because you can get, you can get potentially get flank charge, do some useful stuff with him. Combat Quattle, as he's known when he gets involved in the fight. Um, but yeah, the res 2 on these guys and the offensive skill 2, only strength 3, AP 0. I mean, they do have agility 4. They're not the absolute worst fighters, but they really aren't very good. And there's only 15 of them, so the Skink's not that tough. There's certainly a lot of units that will really tear through them very easily in melee. Say the resilience 2 and only armor 2 really hurts them in certain situations. And again, the Caimans, whilst they have this massive strength 7 AP 4, they are hitting at agility 0. Again, they don't have ridiculous defense on their side. They do have 3 hit points each, 3 attacks each. But if you lose one, you're really struggling, right? And obviously, only one guy. You can get him in the flank, um, and then they're really struggling as well because they won't have any ranks. So you'll instantly be getting bonuses and no steadfast, all that kind of stuff. So the skink and the Cayman unit are like, yeah, I feel like it's almost like they're not a glass hammer because of the way they work, but they are a more fragile patrol than they first appear. They kind of look really strong on paper, but when you actually play with them and against them, which I have done in the past, as I say, I don't think they. I think they've got vulnerabilities that come through. But yeah, strong magic, cold blooded are definitely the two biggest strengths of it, and the good Saurian warriors unit. But as I say, the other two units can be vulnerable in the wrong circumstances. So then we move on to the Vampire Covenant, who interestingly, a Lich King, I think there might have been, is he played in the German league? Obviously, we had it country based. RH Worldbuilding won from the USA league. Lich King, I think, might have come second in the German league, but because the top ranked player couldn't play in the finals matches, I think Lich King took his place. If I'm incorrect about that, I apologise. I've been trying to read the chat, but I've been very busy. I haven't kept up with everything here. It's also why I've not been able to do any battle analysis until this point. But I did really want to get involved, especially in these matches that I didn't play. So as I say, I had a good look at all this before I watched the game. I have now gone back and watched it on Twitch to see what happened before I did the battle report, because it'd be pretty hard to do it in real time, obviously. If I didn't know what was going to happen, pretty hard to talk about. But I promise you, all this kind of thought process I went through, I actually went through it before the game. Now again, this patrol is an interesting one. So obviously Lich King's done pretty well with them, as he came in second. But I actually think they're one of the weaker ones, the Vampire Covenant. I do think they possibly need. We did buff them a bit, and I suspect they might even need a little bit more. Um, the problem is none of these are all they've no real missile attacks to be talking about. They've got one shooty spell from the Vampire Courtier, Hasten the Hour, but that's only effective against certain particular targets. Like it's not all round. It basically it does just one hit to one guy and AP 10. And that can be great against the right unit or the right characters. Can be scared of that, so it might force your opponent's. But I say you can even pick out characters from a unit, so can be threatening over the course of a game, but it's not usually super dangerous. I guess the units that are most vulnerable to that are cavalry units, but there isn't one, of course, in the Saurian Agents Patrol, so no ideal targets for Hasten the Hour there. And even the Quattle is because he's got 4 hit points and an Aegis. He doesn't. He's not compared to a lot of other characters. Put it this way, he's not scared of that Hasten the Hour. I mean, every character's somewhat scared of it. You can hide behind units, of course. You can't hide in a unit, but you can hide behind a unit because we don't have any height line of sight rules in Essence of War. So any character, even the Quattle, even though he might be taller than the Skinks, he can still hide behind them if he wants to. Um, the Arise spell, though, is quite interesting. I'll talk about the magic. Could get back to the units in a second. The Arise spell of it, that heals up all units within 6 inches of the Vampire Courtier. But yeah, the difficult thing is that none of these units are actually that good at fighting. So the ghouls, whilst they have 2 attacks each, strength 3, AP 0 only, so they can potentially get a lot of attacks. They've got 15 of these guys, but they're not super good attacks. They're low quality, but a lot of attacks. Zombies are low quality and not even that many attacks. So there's 20 zombies, but only 1 attack each. Again, a lot of strength 3, AP 0 damage here. The vampire himself or herself pumps out a bit of a kick in. That's rather good. 4 attacks at strength 5, AP 2. One of the best combat characters in Essence of War. But the trouble is, of course, if the vampire is fighting within a unit, one of these he has to join either the ghouls or the zombies if he wants to join a unit. And at that point, can his damage that he can output mitigate the amount of hits that these guys are taking? Because obviously, the way the combat results work, the vampire could go by himself, could be good, right? But then he doesn't have any rank. So whereas yeah, it's a bit of a tricky one because if you put the vampire in say the zombies, but then the opponent just hits the zombies, and they're obviously a lot easier to hit and to damage than the vampire. And then if you win the combat by a large margin, the undead special rule kicks in, and what happens is you lose more guys. You never run away. So again, we're talking about strong discipline. They are kind of in theory on paper strong discipline, but this undead crumbling rule can really catch you out. There's no losing combat by a couple of points and kind of getting lucky and surviving. Um, they often then just crumble, right? So you automatically lose wounds, which is particularly bad on the Spectral Hunters because they're a very small unit, only 5 cavalry. They do have flying and they do have the undead rule, but say undead on rule on them is actually possibly a disadvantage overall. They do have 2 attacks each, strength 5, AP 10, which sounds amazing, but the problem is they're agility 0 and they don't have a great defensive stat line. So a lot of units, they are a very RPSy unit. There's some units that really struggle to fight these Spectral Hunters. But a lot of units will hit them first, mop them up, and then, yeah, you'll get a few attacks back, but it won't be enough, and then they'll crumble. And one of the big problems with Spectral Hunters is just surviving because you're really good with this patrol. One thing that does make them good is because nothing's ever going to run. So if you can predict ahead of time, um, you can really some clever stuff to kind of guarantee your units will be near the objective, which is, as you know, everything that matters in Essence of War at the basic level at least. So yeah, the Spectre Hunter is useful for that. But if you're looking at this matchup though, realistically, I don't like the Spectral Hunters against any of these guys. Yes, they will sort of both they might have a bit of mutual destruction against the Caimans, but overall, I'd slightly favour the Caimans in that fight, just because the amount of hit points they've got, 6 hit points to 5 on the Spectral Hunters, and then overall they're kind of winning that one. So yeah, it's not bad. If I had to fight anything, I'd want to fight this Caimans, but I still don't like it. What I really want to do is get the Spectral Hunters in the flank of something and get some bonuses. I don't really want to get them attacked too much by anything, especially Soaring Warriors will tear through them. Even Skinks are given problems potentially if there's all the attacks going at them first. Um, Whereas, yeah, if you can get them around the side. So my Spectre Hunters game plan, if I was playing Vampire Covenant, would be to kind of dance around. Um, the zombies, yeah, and this is a tricky one because ideally I feel like I want the vampire to run solo, as I say, because actually the vampire by himself can potentially do a number on obviously on the Growl, right? Or maybe even the Caimans one-on-one. He doesn't do too bad. It's risky, very risky that one because the Caimans can totally do a lot of damage to him. But the Skinks are a really soft target. As long as you don't fluff your dice rolls, I'll be like, huh, okay, maybe I could send my vampire off, take out the skink unit. Like, I know this is sounding crazy, but it could just work. And then you've got kind of Spectre Hunters dancing in the flanks. Um, but the problem with all the problem with all of this is, as soon as the vampire is on his own, it becomes very vulnerable to the magic of the Saurian agent. So the Fireball spell and Scorching Salvo spell are quite a scary. He'll survive 1 hit, right? But will he survive 2 or 3 hits over the course of the game if he starts running about by himself? Very hard to keep him safe if he doesn't get into combat. So again, you probably have to put the vampire in a unit. Um, you could easily beat the nice thing is you can probably beat up the skinks with your ghouls because the ghouls really pummel skinks. So I really want that fight if I'm looking at it from the vampire point of view. I really don't want that fight if I'm looking for it from the Saurian Ancients point of view. Um, the Saurians, I feel like they've got a couple of ways to play this. They can either sit back and try and maximize their magic potential, just try and because they really do win the missile battle, right? Say, hey, now, yeah, fine, but they don't have that much shooting, but it's basically really the magic that's going to do it, and maybe a few Skink Brave shots. The trouble with the Skink Braves is obviously to get within their 12-inch shooting range. Whilst they can move and fire without penalty, it's something that's not written on the card there, but it is in play and it is in the rules, and it definitely does come into play in this game. Um, they can yeah, they can sort of they could probably get one round of shooting safe, but then after that they're vulnerable to being charged back, and it'll be on a even these advanced four units, the ghouls or the zombies, potentially charge them on a at worst an 8 if you're within range to shoot at all. Probably closer than that to get enough to get all your shots in because you see each individual model is measured from. So to get your second rank of Skinks Braves, and you're probably on about a 7 charge. So yeah, they can either say two plays to play it if I was Saurians. I'm thinking I dance around, try and maximize the potential of my magic before we get into a fight. Um, or I can and then try and get some skink brave shots and maybe dance around. Again, the Caimans, I wouldn't really want to get them stuck in. They can probably take the ghouls out, I would say, because they easily eat that res 4 armor 0. And there's not that high quality attacks coming at them, but it's enough attacks to sort of scare them all. But yeah, really, it's realistically, it's about getting the Saurian warriors in quickly. I feel if you want to go combat, you don't want to try and go for the shooting. You could then instead you could push in with the Saurians, make them a problem that the vampire player has to deal with like very quickly, um, and then protect their flanks with the other units. Perhaps would be a way to do it, and then focus on using the flaming swords on combat buff for them. Or you can try this kind of dancing shooting kind of style, and I feel like so much of this game will come down to who has to deploy because I don't I really don't like the Vampire Covenant's chances if they have to go down first. But if they can go down second and pick their fights a little bit and have the last turn with that very nice rule of undead being very good when you've got the last turn in particular because you guaranteed no one's going to panic. So you don't have to worry about a panic, failing a panic test on the second to last turn of some one or two casualties that mess up your game plan. Um, so yeah, I really feel like if the Saurian agents deploy first, they have to play aggressive to kind of stop that game plan from the vampire to just sit back and score at the end. Um, the other problem, there is actually another problem to mention with the spells because although Scorching Salvo and Fireball can potentially do quite a lot of damage, it's also potentially healable by the Arise spell. So, I mean, depends on what you're firing at. Like the Spectral Hunters are very vulnerable to the magic, um, but the other two units, although you're going to kill a bunch probably every time, they don't have any armor. Arise is probably bringing them back like almost as fast as you can kill them with this, unless you get it off by a salvo and a fireball every turn. But you're not likely to get that. The way Essence of War tends to work is you will tend to get one spell per turn most phases, and you might get two or you might get zero, kind of rarely. Whereas if you're playing your dice right, you should get one spell off generally per turn. So you can't really gamble on that kind of thing. So again, it's like, well, this is a. But if I was deploying second as the Saurians, then maybe that hold back and try and get more magic in might work. But if I'm deploying first, I definitely want to be aggressive, and kind of the opposite of that with the Vampire Covenant. I think you're forced to put the vampire into one of the units. Um, and again, it would really depend on if I deploy first or second. But we'll go into the game and see how the players decide to play this. This was all honestly, this is all my pre-game thoughts. Like this is kind of my thinking on this one before we went into it. What they actually had, we did have RH Worldbuilding did have to deploy first. So Rob, with the Saurian Ancients having to deploy first, which as I say, I think is a huge disadvantage in this matchup, particularly. I think it's a disadvantage overall slightly anyway because of the objective. But it really hurts you here because again, if the zombies, I love to call them all. They're not all zombies. They're the Vampire Covenant, but they're mostly zombies, right? So if they get to pick their matchups, I'm kind of worried. So let's see what Rob decides to do here. He drops like this, which I'll show you on an overhead view as well. These, of course, are his papercraft models, which he has in real life and has in digital form here within Tabletop Simulator as well. Very, very nice. Drops like this, kind of like the centrally placed Saurian Ancient, Saurian Warriors here. That's good. I would have probably placed them a bit further up and tried to. I'm a bit worried about something maybe coming around their flank. Um, and it's like I just don't want to get them flanked. I just want them stuck in. So I might have even swapped their positions with the Quattl or something to because the Quattl can protect their flanks reasonably well because he can come into play as quite a nice kind of chaff style blocking unit. I do kind of like the more vulnerable units being put out here. Don't The woods kind of don't matter because there's not really much shooting to talk of with each patrol, right? So they're fairly irrelevant in this matchup. The Caymans out here to kind of swing in and use their movement is kind of good. And again, if I was I like that actually particularly as well because if I was the Vampire Covenant, I would probably want to send one of my big blocks to deal with the Caymans to give the rank bonus that they can't deal with because they don't have enough attacks to kind of grind through enough guys. Especially the zombies, actually, I kind of like against the Caymans because they've got the full ranks. And especially if the vampire's in there as well. Vampire plus zombies versus Caymans is again that is a good fight overall for the vampire side. So I kind of like them because the opposite deployment thing. If I'm the vampire player, I'm like, well, the matchup I want is zombies plus vampire versus Caymans, but I don't really want to put my vampire and my zombies right out on the side because they're very slow. I've then got a problem trying to get them into the scoring zone. So I really like that placement of the Caymans. Skinks, I feel, yeah, I might be tempted to hold back a bit more with them, but again, I suppose you've got to be aggressive. But again, I'd probably be thinking of them as more of a flank defense for these guys and just getting these guys stuck in would kind of be my plan. So I kind of like some of this, but it's always hard to deploy first because the other it really comes down to how the other player decides to counter deploy. Um, so what was I thinking here? Yeah, so I'd be like, well, I'd probably, if it was me, I'd probably set the Spectral Hunters up against the Caymans because that fight's not super, and maybe if you pop off a couple of wounds with Haste in the Hour on them, then maybe, or you can at least kind of dance. And I'd be like, well, my Spectral Hunters, if again, it's that trade-off kind of idea. If I can trade what I think is one of the weaker units for one of their units, I'm like, that's kind of a win for me. I just want to keep both of them out of the zone and not involved in the main battle. And of course, the Spectre Hunters have got better movement, so they're probably going to win the charge. So you're probably slightly better at that zoning style out on the flank than even the Caymans could be. And then obviously, if they try and swing down to the middle, I'd be like, well, I've got fly, I can jump over this wood and not take dangerous terrain potentially, depending on how they land from their flying and how the Caymans are positioned. Um, but I kind of like the idea of just using the Spectral Hunters to kind of combat, you know, counter that threat and then I'm willing to push. I just probably push it with my ghouls. I'd want to engage these skinks as fast as possible. But the trouble is, I don't want to engage these soaring warriors. So it might be a bit of a game of cat and mouse, really. But it's not up to me, of course. What does Lich King decide to do? He does it like this, which again, I can see immediately. He's put the vampire into the zombies. Makes a lot of sense. Um, but he's put them rather direct across from the Saurian warriors, which I'm not sure about because I don't want the fight there. I kind of like again. I like these ghouls going into this look like they're sort of going for the skinks, but also protecting this main unit. But yeah, I don't understand the positioning of the spectral hunters down here, particularly on the hill. Even, I mean, they're kind of directly across from this building. I'm guessing they're maybe going to try and swing around here, threaten, get a flank. But I think if he's going to do that, he actually wants to put them further down, to make it easier to because it's but you're gonna have to wheel this way and then back again because the way wheel maneuvers work, it's hard to come back out and then swing back down again. So because you're going to easily end up like blocking your own unit behind this building if you're not very careful with your movement. So kind of like to think of arcs of movement because of the way the wheeling works in the Ninth Age. But yeah, I like some of this again. I guess basically from both players' perspective, both points point of view, it's probably not exactly what I would have done, but definitely a good chunk of it I like for both players. Again, the vampire into the unit, I can kind of understand why, because the threat of those spells is just too high, and I think Lich King even commented that on the stream. So yeah, it's a tough one. Can I say that I find that this is why I think the Vampire Covenant Patrol is a little bit weak on the weak side, because they just don't kind of it doesn't all fit together. Like some of their stats look fine, but they don't have enough high damage attacks. There are matchups where I think they're strong, and I do think going second is a huge advantage for them. So I say I'm not completely down on them, but they aren't. They're definitely not one I would have picked. So Rich King very brave going with them in this tournament. So we move on to Saurian Ancients turn one. So they do have to go first. Rob pushes up like this, which was kind of surprising to me because I'm guessing he's kind of wanting to go for this maximize the potential of my magic idea. But again, I think because he had to deploy first and had to take this first turn, I would have been tempted to do a very aggressive play because I really want my Saurian warrior stuck in ASAP if it had been me. Um, but I kind of like this. I suppose he's got a problem here how to deal with the ghouls though because you've got the one strongest unit right, but you do have multiple units that are a threat to all of your other units, and that's the tricky thing. Spectre Hunters I'm not scared of, as I say. Maybe in the side of the Caimans I'd be scared, but anything else, even front to front, yeah, it's a kind of push really. Probably slight advantage Caimans if both units are undamaged, and judging how the magics should go, um, you're more likely to be able to get some damage off on these guys with a fireball. Whereas hasten the hour, most it's going to do is like 1 or 2 hit points to them before they get into a fight, right? And if they both strike at agility 0, they both get to swing. So again, um, so yeah, maybe that's part of the play actually of these Spectral Hunters. Maybe Lich King is just trying to keep them out of the action, really realistically, and kind of use them as just a scoring unit at the end of the game, which does make sense. So if that is Lich King's thinking, I don't know, and then it is very smart indeed. But yeah, Rob, I say, part move forward, but a bit more dancy. I think I'd have been very aggressive, to be fair, if I'd been Saurian Ancients having to deploy and having to move first. Knowing the way this could go, I think that's what I would have done. Does go to the magic phase, gets 5 dice versus 2. 5 dice is his fireball into the Spectral Hunters. There we go. Look at these beautiful little. I don't know where these miniatures are from, but these obviously are real life. Looks like real life models anyway that have been scanned into Tabletop Simulator. Looking very sweet. Veil of the Ages mods for Tabletop Simulator. Go and check them out if you haven't already. Just type T9A into the Steam workshop and you can find all the gorgeous stuff there that we are playing with here. It's all free, all available there to download if you own Tabletop Simulator. Um, yes, I can't remember what this roll is for, but yeah, gets off a bunch of hits. Yeah, they all damage, but he does save both of them, which was incredible. I think he got one of the Aegis saves and one of the armor saves, 2 Aegis saves and 1 armor save. I think he got. So there's rather ridiculous armor saving. And then to make matters worse, this was also a miscast, and he got 2 hits, both of them damage, and he failed both Aegis saves. So that is, I mean, losing the fireball might have been worse on turn 1, but that is about as unlucky as you can get from magic, right? And as I was saying, that trying to max my magic, I'm already a bit worried now with Rob's game plan because he's gone for this kind of okay, I'm going to try and do a lot of shooting with magic, but after a kind of disastrous first turn of magic, I would again, right? Maybe it'd been if I'd been playing this, maybe my mind would have been torn between those 2 ways to play this. But as soon as I saw that on turn 1, I'd be like, right, time to get stuck in, boys. We're not going to do the shooting war because I'm already a bit nervous now about my quad will take too many hits. So on to the zombies. I'm still doing it. The vampire covenant turn 1 starts out like this. We get a big push up. So. Uh, mm, I like the pushing up with the again he's given them I think he's given long charges over here, but very long charges if at all. Um, it's a tricky one again. Do you want to engage? Don't you want to engage? I kind of feel like you want to engage one of these units, ideally the skinks quickly. Um, Whereas I'm not sure I'd push up quite so aggressively in the middle. The Spectral Hunters again, this is what I was concerned about from their initial deployment is they're going to move forward and then you're almost stuck. You now can't really. You've got one option really of movement, which is just this way, and that's the trouble. If you end up behind a building and too close to it, you can easily kind of get yourself in a bit of a telegraph position there, where there's not a lot of options for you. So moving on, also gets the best magic card probably. Yeah, 5 plays 2 on turn 1, which isn't when it's the most useful to be fair. I don't think he got off. I can't remember. No, correct. Sorry, definitely did a hasten the hour to try and pick another wound off that beleaguered Coatl, but did hit and also did cast a spell successfully on 5 versus 2. I think he only rolled 4 dice, didn't get a miscast, but the Aegis save was made. So again, this Coatl, he's pretty tough. Those 4 hit points and Aegis 4 up just keep him alive. Although he's already took that damage from his own fireball, a bit too much for his own his own doing. Excuse me, taking a sip of wine to keep up the energy here. There we go. Right. So turn two for the Saurian Ancient starts off like this. Doesn't declare any charges, which is fine. I mean, now I'd be like, okay, I really want to push in with my Saurian warriors. Is what I would do. But Rob does not. He does this, which really surprised me. So moving up with the Skinks, who I'd be like, I don't want them anywhere near. But he is kind of causing a nice pincer with the Caimans, right? So that is nice. Um, I guess it's kind of putting pressure on these ghouls and a bit of pressure on the zombies. But realistically, I don't know how scared either of these units are of the Caimans in the flank because they will. I suppose they're not that good at reforming, but yeah, I wouldn't mind getting the Caimans into the flank of the ghouls. I think I quite like that for the Saurian Ancients. If I was gonna, I'd definitely be trying for that option. Did run into the wood slightly here and did almost. I was like, hang on, are they going to forget it? They're going to forget the dangerous trade test, but they no, they did. Pateo reminded them, and they did make it, and he didn't take any damage. So that was all good. Kind of understand the hiding the Quattle because he doesn't want that haste now, picking him off every time, and he's still got a line of sight down here to his favourite target for the fireball, which is these guys, and they've been so lucky not to lose anyone already. It's absolutely remarkable they didn't lose any damage, as I say. So it's gone really, really badly in terms of the dice. And I say, I think maybe this is a feint. You could do one thing you can do because the discipline is so good with that cold-blooded. Fleeing early in the game is not a bad move necessarily with the Saurian Ancients because you have got a very very high chance to rally and get back in the action. So you can use them as a kind of bait. So I was like, maybe that's what Rob's looking for here. Maybe he's looking for a flee with the skink braves not being brave in that situation. But yeah, they're not moving up the Saurian Warriors. I was like, what's going on? I think Lich King was thinking the same thing because I remember on the stream he did joke. It's like, this is the tactic to keep the Saurian Ancients on your back in your deployment zone for the entire game, kind of thing. And I was like, yeah, I don't know what the thought process is. I cannot tell you. I'm here to analyze, not get. Well, I am doing a lot of guessing, obviously. Got the 7 plays 4, the big dice one, but again, hard to take advantage of it sometimes in some situations. Went for the flaming swords, I guess, because of the way he's positioned, he hadn't maximised the potential of scorching salvo at all. Um, so elects to put the flaming swords on the skinks, and they are in range of their blowpipes. And then he also does a fireball against the spectral hunters again, ends up again being really unlucky and only killing one. So these Spectral Hunters are on on like well into overtime right now. They've took 2 fireballs to the face and lost one guy total. That is insane. If you don't want to look at the odds of that, they took minimum hits each time as well. D3 plus 2 took 3 hits each time. But even that, 6/6 strength 4 AP0, they should be lost like quite a few of them, and they're just somehow surviving. So this is huge for the Vampire Covenant here and Lich King. So very, very, very disappointing fireballs. Didn't miscast this turn at least. However, we move on to the Skink Braves poison shooting with flaming blowpipes. The flaming didn't really matter because he rolled a heck of a lot of sixes. This was the most insane shooting. He took out 6 zombies. At fives, this was fives hit, but he rolls like a bunch of sixes, and then I think he did 3 damage because of the strength 4 on the flaming blowpipes. So yeah, a really impressive round of shooting there, and that would have been really scary if you had a panic test. But obviously, at least the in terms of patrols that can handle this, the vampire are pretty good at handling this because yeah, you lost 6 zombies, but you've got the arise spell potential to get them back, and of course you don't panic. So you're less bothered about that than some patrols would be. I've seen shooting phases like that against my poor goblins when I'm playing orcs and goblins, and it's like it's very miserable because that's them those goblins gone, and that all they have when you've got a weak unit like this, and its main thing it's got going for it is the numbers, of course. And once you start losing them, you're like, oh, they're kind of useless now, right? And I mean, I think he could have shot the ghouls instead. I'm not sure, but anyway, going to the Vampire Covenant turn 2. I think he does a little shuffle around. Let's see. Yeah, so he moves up like this. So the Spectral Hunters move back, which again, I think their first turn movement was a bit of a maybe and a bit of a mistake, maybe. So Lich King kind of rewinds, gets out of any charges. Just again, I definitely at this point think, okay, he's using them as a scoring unit. Like his only goal really with them is to try not to die. And considering he's rolling armor saves like a boss, right, from these fireballs, he's doing very good at this game plan. So he's keeping them out of the action, just trying to score on the last turn. Makes a lot of sense to me. And repositions his ghouls there to kind of stop any flank charges coming in. So I kind of like that because the skinks just don't scare them in the front at all. And the caimans, iffy in the front. They can maybe do something, but I mean that's a tricky one. It's a very tricky decision for the Sorin Ancients player to go for that. I might be tempted to stick the caimans into them, but I want just to avoid the skinks having to deal with them. That would make sense potentially, but how long are the caimans going to last? It's going to be a dice. It's going to be a dice game at that point. You only got those 6 attacks, and you're only on fours to hit, I believe. Yeah, the offensive skill of those is maybe it's threes, but it's they're definitely twos to damage. That's a good bit. But I think you only got 6 attacks hitting on threes or fours, so you're only killing 3 or 4 a turn if you're a bit lucky. And if you get a bad roll, their ranks and a bit if they get a lucky roll with their lots and lots of strength 3 attacks. You are res 4, armor 3. I mean, yeah, it would be a gameplay situation for me. That would be a fight I would take if I had to. I wouldn't be one I'd be looking for, but I would be thinking about it. But yeah, the problem Rob has here, of course, is that his Saurian warriors are nowhere near these fighting right now, which is not what he wants, in my opinion. Um, so there we go. But yeah, so back off with the Spectre Hunters, shuffle forward. The ghouls, to say, just pushing forward, and the zombies do not move. Um, Gets the 3 plays 2, gets an arise off, which he tries to stop. I didn't actually measure this right, and I'm not 100% certain that it only goes 6 inches. So obviously it hits his own unit, no problem. I'm not certain he's within 6 with the Spectral Hunters here. So I didn't obviously I wasn't watching this stream live. I did watch it later, so I couldn't comment on that. But so probably shouldn't have done it. Maybe it would have been unsporting. But yeah, I was like, hang on a minute. So anyway, whatever they're in range. They've agreed they're in range. So yeah, they do get, and he does get a Spectral Hunter back. So he's managed to keep his Spectral Hunters at full force, and his zombies are barely taking the damage either now. Getting 4 of them back is huge. Only losing 2 essentially overall now. So go on to the turn 3 for the Saurian Ancients. And at this point, oh, again, I'd have been if these Saurian Ancients had pushed up last turn. I don't know what he'd have done. Would he have backed off with the zombies, possibly out of the zone? You'd have been in a threat range anyway, at very least. Whereas now it's kind of like, well, what do you want to do? You've kind of got a not amazing fight here. I might choose if I ended up if you kind of dropped me in a play this game from this point, I might go for that Cayman charge. But Rob decides not to, does not make any charges, and he goes for this wacky maneuver. I like the backing off with the skinks. So it was kind of maybe what I was thinking of. Maybe you get in, get a charge, and then flee. But as he's now on turn 3, fleeing's not really an option anymore. So instead he backs off to make it a long charge. But he does stay within blowpipe range of the ghouls, which does make them have a possibility of getting a charge off. It's not a super long charge that with their 4 plus 2 dice. I think it's only about 11. Yeah, I think it's about 12. It's about an 11 inches, so I think it's about 7 from the closest point, and then but they are all in shooting range at least, I believe. The Caymans though, he does a few little attempts at this, and absolutely amazingly manages to get them here, which is so cheeky. He's got them out of line of sight of the ghouls, I thought he was trying to get them to force them have to go in his flank, but he's even managed to enrange it so they have to go in the front with this block. But I still don't know why Rob went for this, because as I mentioned earlier, those zombies and the vampire versus the Caymans, that's a fight I want if I'm the vampire player. But my problem is the Caymans were over here originally. I don't want to have this fight outside the scoring zone. I've got to keep my zombies and my vampire in the middle. Um, so whereas now these kind of Caymans have just said, "Come at me, bro," and it's kind of given me the ideal matchup that I want as the vampires. So I don't know. I guess I mean it does look very clever, like this little maneuver over here with the Caymans, very very sneaky. But actually, I think he's kind of double bluffed himself in some ways. Because I'm like, if I'm the vampire player, I'm like, right, perfect, that's what I want. The risky thing is, of course, if he does go in for this and he fluffs it somehow, this is very scary. You're going to get absolutely brutalized from the Soaring Warriors coming in the flank next turn. So I guess from Rob's point of view, he's hoping that these Caimans can just hold up for one round of combat with a cold-blooded test, but they're not going to be steadfast, right? And if you lose a couple of wounds, I mean, they've only got 6 attacks. Again, you should kill 3 or 4 zombies, right? And then, but the vampire's in there now, and he could easy do 2 or 3 wounds to you as well. That's kind of a push. So you're potentially losing by like, well, I guess 2, or if they charge you, so you're probably losing by about 3-ish on average, maybe more with good bad rolling, right? So again, that's going down to a discipline 5, cold-blooded, which isn't so good. Like that's it's not bad, but it's a high risk maneuver here. I feel from Rob that these Caimans are going to be able to stick. If they do stick, then yeah, everything looks absolutely great for his turn. Though that's the good part of this play. But it's so high risk, and I'm like, would I have done that? Would I instead of just sent the Caimans into the ghouls and gone with the charge bonus, and I just hope I don't fluff my rolls. Again, I feel I like that fight a lot more than I wanted. I don't want the vampire fighting my Caimans basically because he's the only one that can realistically get a lot of damage through on them with his strength 5 and AP 2. Whereas yeah, but then Rob does of course finally push up with his Sauron warriors and the Coatl, but it is turn 3. Is it too late? We shall see. But yeah, so then he goes to the. So he is trying to maximize his magic and his shooting here. So again, that was kind of the way I said he could play it, and he's definitely going for that now, despite the miscast and despite the situation. Um, Gets off a scorching salvo. It goes through because he's scared. He wants to stop the fireball hitting the Spectral Hunters more than he wants to stop the Scorching Salvo hitting these guys, which makes sense again because he's got the Arise spell, kind of counters the damage on these units, and actually the Scorching Salvo does less damage than a Fireball will against this single unit. So this makes a lot of sense why he let through the Salvo to prevent the Fireball, because Lich King is clearly thinking, right, I've been lucky so far, my Spectral Hunters, they've just got to hang on and not die by the end of the game to get me that scoring point, right? So he gets through a lot of burn damage. He does lose 3 ghouls, a couple of more. I don't think I think he doesn't lose a single zombie, which is very lucky. But does lose a single spectral hunter. So again, spectral hunters super lucky in how they're not getting anything. Just nothing's going through from the magic, right? So yeah, and he did another miscast. That's correct, and he took another hit point. So really, really risky stuff here. And again, this is the problem if you're going for this magic at this point. Um, so there we go into the zombie phase. What does he decide to do? Turn 3. Has anything else? Oh no, sorry, bit more javelin poison shooting. I don't think he killed anyone this turn, or maybe got one. Yeah, maybe he killed one more ghoul. So a bit of damage from the scorching salvo, and maybe one more from the poison shots. So a little bit back to average, really overall for those from those skinks right at this point. But yeah, the back off and shoot quite a tricksy maneuver. I like it, but you're still in close charge range. But the good news is they're out of the zone. So if Lich King goes for that charge, neither unit will be in the zone. And I guess if you're going to trade ghouls for skinks, it's not too bad. But if the skinks don't hold up for a turn, then the ghouls are still going to be able to. Again, this is the advantage of going second, right? It makes that scoring thing. There's so many situations where it becomes risky and or impossible for your unit to score because you've got to move before your opponent does, right? And that's the thing with this situation here. Similar, is it sort of goes on from the start of the game and it ends up like this in turn 3 and turn 4. Um, so there we go. So Lich King's turn now, turn 3 with the Vampire Covenant, decides to go for 3 big charges. This is very interesting. So he does go for this charge. He only needs a 7, as I thought it probably would be. So that's a very good. I mean, yeah, again, he's banking on having to break them in one turn to be able to get back in the scoring. Pretty good chance he will though, because they are an absolute they are the perfect unit to hit skinks, right? You need a lot. You want a lot of attacks, and your quality of attacks doesn't matter too much because they've only got res 2, only got armor 2. So that's a very should be a good matchup on paper. Obviously, it's dice, so it's not 100%. And maybe the skinks get lucky and they don't kill enough, and then they can easily hold, right? And then it kind of becomes a grind that neither units like. I mean, again, they'll probably win over time, but they're not super great. For either player at that situation. And then he also double charges this Caimans. Had a big think about this one. He was trying to get in the could he get in the flank, and then the Spectrons in the front. But this is actually quite genius. I did not spot this right. So this is a rule in the Ninth Age that I do not think of. But these guys are both charging in the front of the Caymans. They're both auto charges, and Rob holds from both of them, which he kind of has to now because he's held off. But yeah, getting the Spectre Hunters in, even a couple more attacks at Strength 5, that's really useful, especially and the AP10. So they are just as good at damaging and even better at damaging these guys than the vampire is almost. They're not quite as good at hitting, but that's an extra couple of attacks in if you can get some in. But I was like, how is he going to get them in and maximize contact? What he does, as you'll see in a moment, he actually does kind of a cross charge. So he charges the ghouls in first, aligning across like this, and the Spectre Hunters come in behind and charge this corner to this corner. So I didn't see that. I was like, well, the Spectre Hunters are gonna have to come over here, and then the ghouls, and it's like the zombies rather have to line up, and it's like, well, then I can't maximize. Like I don't, it took me so long to figure out how that charge works. I'm not familiar enough. But actually, yeah, Lich King plays this one really, really smart by charging both units into the Caymans to maximize the chance of getting rid of them in one turn, which he needs to do. Because if he fluffs it, it is a really bad time for him. So yeah, it goes in like that with everything basically. So first of all, as I say, that they tried to slide over to try and stay in the scoring zone, but they cannot get in because they've lost too many guys. So that damage from the salvo and the blowpipes did make a difference there. But yeah, the skinks just have to desperately try and hope they can hold for this one combat round. If they can, then they've kind of at least traded adequately, right? But then this one, there's you see the crossover charge, really nice play. And I'm really, really worried for Rob now because I'm like, oh no, this is double bad, right? It was bad enough just fighting the vampire, but we're also fighting at least a couple of attacks coming in from the spectral hunters, and of course the agility 0 really hurts these Caymans when there's only two of them, because if you can kill one before they get to swing, that's half their attacks gone. Um, and can he do it? Really, that's all it comes down to. Does the vampire and the zombies roll well enough to kill one before he swings? We do the ghoul combat first. Oh, we're getting a rise spell off as well. And again, they didn't measure it. And again, I'm not sure that that's 6 inches to the ghouls. But obviously these guys are in, so it does get them all back. So successful magic phase. I think I can't remember which card he had, but definitely gets off the arise. And the other spell was obviously irrelevant anyway. I think it was a 5 plays 4, and he got it off. Can't remember exactly, but yeah, gets back a couple of goals that he maybe shouldn't have done. Gets back a Spectre Hunter, which maybe I'm not sure, but definitely this turn, but maybe not on the previous turn. Um, and then we get to this battle. As I said, ghouls, can they blend the skinks in one round? It really comes down to that. Yes, they can. 5 guys down. Pretty bad news. Skinks do kill a couple back. But yeah, pretty much this is pretty much odds on. And then he's down to he's losing like with the charge as well, and didn't even get a rank, which is kind of unlucky, and especially if that arise hadn't happened. Might have well have got a rank which could have helped him, because if you get up to discipline 4 or 5 on cold-blooded, your odds of making it become all right. But this was discipline 3 cold-blooded and could not make that roll, unfortunately. So it's very bad news, and it's going to be last turn, so he's going to get a chance to rally them. But that's essentially Skink's gone for the game, and double whammy because the ghouls get to reform and get into the zone. So a big swing in favour of Lich King. The odds were in his favour. Rob was kind of playing for a bit of luck there, didn't get it, so that's unfortunate. Then we move on to this combat, and again, pretty good rolling from the vampire side. Does kill off one of the Caymans before he even gets to swing with the vampire at plus the zombies, because even the zombies at agility 1, I think, they still go before those Caymans, and they just had to get through that one hit point. I think the vampire dealt 2, and then the 9 zombies got 1 more. So zombies, pretty good roll in there. And then maybe even got 2. I can't remember. Yeah, I think there's another hit point. And then I think he hit and wounded with both rolls from the Spectral Hunters as well. So the Cayman is no not for this world, but on his way out to Agility 0, he would swing back and he would kill a single zombie. So an absolute disastrous rolling by the Caymans. At that point, by the way, having known I was going to lose them, I would have probably put everything into the Spectral Hunters, because there's still a chance in the last turn that you can wipe that unit with the Cayman's magic, right? So, sorry, the Coatl's magic. The Cayman do not have magic. But yeah, if I'd done my last, I was like, well, my Caymans are gone. My last 3 swings, I would actually have sent at the Spectral Hunters, because if I could kill 2 or 3 of them, then maybe a Fireball or a Scorching Salvo could have finished them off in the last turn. So that would have been my my thinking there, because I was like, well, and then, yeah, so Lich King had a lot of thinking about did he want to overrun or not. I probably would have overrun with both, and he didn't. I think he was worried about because he's only got one more turn, right? And he was worried about overrunning out of the zone. But I was thinking, well, if I overrun enough, I'd have had to measure it because I'm not sure what the arc is on these Soaring Warriors. But I was like, if I overrun with both units, could I get them out of the zone? Because it's the last turn for the Saurians, right? Next turn. So if I can not get charged by those Soaring Warriors at all for the entire game, I am absolutely laughing as a vampire player here, right? So if I don't know what I'd have measured it up and figured out the odds, right? But I think about a 7 is probably average, right? Would that have got the back corner of the zombies out of line of sight of those Saurian warriors? I don't know. I have to say though, as well, this game was played under a lot of time pressure, right? So they only had an hour to play the game. And as you can see, I can nearly talk about it for just now, so you can think about just how fast you have to play. It's very feasible to get this game done in an hour, but you do have to play very quickly. I managed to get my games done in under an hour, but I made some pretty bad mistakes in both games. And I do think the time pressure got to me a little bit because I was consciously very much trying to play quickly. I'm not thinking everything through that I probably would have done if I knew I had a bit more time. So I think like if you wanted to alleviate that time pressure a little bit on players, like giving them like an hour 10, an hour 15, an hour 20 would be absolutely fine. But playing on TTS as well, it all kind of depends how good you are with the interface, and I'm not super good with it, so I kind of make mistakes and struggle a little bit. Whereas things in real life, I could do them a lot quicker because I'd know how to do it. Whereas on TTS, I'm sometimes kind of, how do I get that line of sight? How do I do this? How do I do that? Whereas real life, get my little laser pen. All good, right? um, but yeah, anyway, so although some things are a lot quicker on TTS, of course, working out the exact distances between units and things is an absolute breeze, and moving them and not messing up wheels and things is really, really simple. So yeah, it decided to overrun only with the Spectral Hunters, which sort of made sense to me, but I was like, I'd at least thought about the overrun with the zombies, whereas he didn't. He went for the reform with the zombies and the vampire, and that's basically asking the Soaring Warriors to fight you, right? And then it didn't really. I was like, well, at that point, it doesn't really matter what you do with the Spectral Hunters, whether you send them off or don't, right? It didn't really matter to me. I was like, well, whatever happens, this should be able to get back into the zone. Um, there was some risk if you rolled ridiculously high and went off like 12 inches this way, they'd run into the wood, take DTs, and then not be able to get back into the zone or something like that. But the odds were that it would be fine if you overrun with both unit. Really, I don't think it would have mattered. Um, and yeah, either way, I suppose you end up with I guess the zombies and you'd probably in the flank from the Sorin Warriors might have been even worse, but they don't like that fight anyway, so I don't know. But yeah, it did lose one zombie. As I say, could have been maybe been one Spectral Hunter if he'd swung at them instead, which probably would have been made more sense because he wasn't going to. Well, there's no way you can win the combat when you're dead, right? So even if you'd somehow managed to roll all 3 kills or whatever on the zombies, it's like not relevant. So does actually scoot off here. I think he rolled a 9 or something, maybe an 8. I'm not sure what that was, but yeah, out of the zone, but shouldn't matter because he can come back in later, so that should be okay for Lich King. Um, and then what happens? Yeah, then he reforms his zombies like this. So yeah, come on, have a go. It's going to come down to the dice phases in the last turn for each player, basically. See what happens. Turn 4, and he's kind of guaranteed himself, should have guaranteed himself a win here, but it's like, ooh, if you could avoid, as I say, if these zombies had overrun up to here instead, right, and out of arc, and then what would you do on the last turn with the Saurian Ancients? You'd basically be reduced to just moving your Saurian warriors into the zone and hopefully getting lucky with some magic and maybe wiping off one of the spectral hunters with the fireball if you got really good roll with it. Which kind of you'd deserve one at this point because you've had such bad magic up to now. Been really really unlucky with his magic was Rob. Um, but as it is, you've got the chance to go for this big fight. So Rob takes it, of course, because why wouldn't he? Does rally the skinks, but it's not relevant because they can't do anything. They go in like that. Really nice maneuver here. Love this. Love this. Actually puts his Quattl in the perfect blocking, annoying spot where he cannot get a overrun. He cannot get another. He basically blocks these ghoul unit. Doesn't stop them getting in the scoring zone because they're already in there, right? So that could have been even tastier if there'd been a way to keep them out of the scoring, but no way you could do that. But does prevent them from getting into any meaningful combat. So that's a really good move from Rob. We do go to the magic, gets a 3 plays 2, goes to the flaming swords on these guys, and I was thinking about all these other things. I was like, oh, well, maybe I should try and wipe out the spectral hunters, but you know what? Actually, it's going to last for 2 combat rounds minimum, unless your Saurian warriors flee, and that's not likely, right? They're not going to lose on the charge unless you roll really badly against these zombies, right? So yeah, but to guarantee it, kind of, yeah, he needs to wipe out these zombies, right? So putting flaming swords on them in the last turn, because then it essentially affects 2 rounds of combat. Actually, a really smart move from Rob. So I would probably have maybe played that wrong and tried to get greedy with the fireball again, but makes much more sense to do this. So yeah, good flaming swords there. Doesn't roll super well, but does roll decent. Kills off 5 zombies, which doesn't sound it sounds good, but believe you me, when there was a lot of ones being rolled, that wasn't as nearly as luck as it could have been. And the zombies, did they manage to kill? Yeah, they managed to kill one Saurian warrior back. So there's more losses there for the zombies, crumbling down at a rapid pace here. Can the zombies hang on in the last turn? For the Vampire Covenant, it's all going to come down to that. Nothing much relevant. He does charge the Quattle, but it's not. It's not really going to matter if you kill him or not. Um, because even if he does it first, then if he does that combat first, then the Soaring Warriors are still in combat, so they can't panic. If he does the other one first, then either way around, he can't get any panic tests. What's mad though is Lich King doesn't backtrack with the Spectral Hunters. He decides to reform them, and I don't know what, because he just sort of forgot that he could backtrack it. I think he got so was thinking from the previous turn, thinking that overrun meant he couldn't get back in the zone, but there was a way he could just back up into the zone. Um, I mean, yeah. So that was a bit of a bad play. Unfortunately for Lich King, could have got an extra point there out of his Spectral Hunters, and that was kind of the game plan with them. The whole game, they've actually done it. Like the whole thing with the Spectral Hunters is like, can they survive this battle from all this flaming stuff coming at them from, and maybe even blowpipes? That would have been even worse. And going in at agility 0, does anything swing at them first and kill them? They say they survived all of that. They survived all the fireballs, all the scorching salvos, all this. Didn't get in. They got into combat. No one hit them, and then on the last turn they fluff it. They fall over at the final hurdle and don't move back into the scoring zone. So what a shame for the Spectral Hunters there. Um, but yeah, the dice that gets the magic phase doesn't get a good magic phase here, but does still get off another arise, which again definitely was in range for this one. Although I don't know. Again, I think that vampire might have had to move over a bit into the middle of that unit to make sure he was within 6 inches, but it would have been easily done from that point as well. So not that's fine. But yeah, the range of that spell is deceptively short, I find, and I struggled with that when I was playing with the vampires. So I was very aware of it when I was watching this, as you might have gathered from the amount I've gone on about it. Does get back a bunch of zombies. Will it help though? Can the Saurian warriors chew through that many guys? The poor old Quattle gets absolutely mullered by the ghouls. He is gone, but it didn't really matter because the ghouls are scoring anyway, and they're still scoring where they are. I suppose you could have put the Quattle out of range so they didn't get to fight anything, but it didn't really matter. All that mattered was don't let the ghouls fight these Saurians in the flank, which he didn't do. So that was good stuff from Rob. And then, unfortunately, the dice rolling. Let's see how it goes. Yeah, 10 zombies dead. Now, that was actually closer to average. So the vampire's got to do a lot of work here. And this is the problem, as I said, with the whole Vampire Covenant patrol. If the vampire's by himself, he'd probably almost do better. Because he'd be only, I mean, yeah, he'd still be worried. I'm not probably the Stone Warriors would still beat him, right? Because he'd still have sort of 4, 8, no, only 6 attacks coming at him though. 6 attacks coming at him from Soaring Warriors, whereas in this case he's got it's 10, 15, 30, 13, or was it 13 or 14 at the time he rolled it? I can't remember, but 13 odd attacks going at the zombies versus 6 attacks at my vampire. I know which I'd rather be dealing with if I'm on a combat resolution score on that one. So this is a tricky thing. Whilst you have got this really good fighty character, he isn't he's got a lot of damage output, but he isn't quite tanky enough to sort of stand by himself and against a lot of patrols that have got a lot of magic that are really dangerous, or ranged firepower that's really dangerous for that vampire core tier. You want to run him solo, but then you run the risk of him not even getting into fights, and then your zombies lose even worse without him, right? So yeah, really hard to use your zombies well, basically, unless you manage to survive right to the end of the game and don't fight, and that is not what happens. The Flaming Swords buffed up Soaring Warriors smash through him on the last turn, and it ends up being a 1-1 draw. And because both players took slightly over time, I think they were on 1 hour 5 minutes or something. They both got a penalty for time as well, so they kind of ended up actually kind of losing points overall. So it's a 1-1, but ends up being overall the way again. You can go and watch Veil of the Ages videos to see exactly how it works, but they end up with a -1 overall on that. So right now, with all else being equal, the English side, I guess I should be supporting. I certainly am really, but I'm trying to be neutral for the purpose of this video. But yeah, Lucky Sixes, my man from from Proxy Table Gaming, already in the lead without even having played a game. So yeah, we'll see how the rest of these finals shape up. We will be playing some more matches, of course, on the Veil of the Ages channel. So come back for that, and hopefully I will be able to get some screenshots and do some more of these battle analysis reports as well for you. But for now, that's me done. Thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you all next time.